Hey everyone, Those Are the Girls with Mallory and Friends. I'm Mallory, and we are changing culture and bringing back traditional values. So I am super excited for today's episode. For this month, the month of January, our topic is human trafficking awareness. So I'm going to be talking to a variety of different women who are in that field and who are bringing awareness in any capacity. And that's going to be the topic. And also, too, just a reminder of our donation. We are selling our t-shirts with the designs you guys picked out, and 100% of the proceeds are going to go to True Justice International. So just a reminder on that. So without further ado, let's get to it. So today's guest is Landon Newsom, also known as Matriarch, and she is a singer, songwriter, and honestly, I found out about her. She was on Abby Johnson's podcast, which is super cool that she even responded to me. Like, that's how awesome she is. And she's just going to tell us a little bit about herself, and then we're going to get into some really good topics. So first, Landon, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into music and things like that?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I think it's awesome that you're doing this because this is what needs to be done to shift culture. So I am a singer-songwriter. I'm a mom of three. I ultimately decided to leave Hollywood when I learned about how much sexual exploitation, how much pedophilia, and just overall darkness is within that culture. I realized I had to make a choice, and my choice was to leave. And so I literally left Hollywood and California, but also in search of an environment that could nurture my, conservative values and family that aligned with those things so that I could truly grow and blossom and bloom. So that's what I did. I left. And now my husband, Robbie Starbuck, and we have a podcast called Grow Up, which is on YouTube, and now going to be in Rumble. And I also, so I write music and I talk about that. And I also do a lot of education, awareness, fundraising, and advocacy for human trafficking victims.
Awesome. So you guys, she has a lot of knowledge and she knows a lot. She knows what she's talking about. So that's like the first thing I want to say. So first I want to get into, you talked a little bit about the pedophilia and sexual exploitation in Hollywood. Is there something you can tell us, like a story or something that happened that really like sparked you and you said, okay, I can't be a part of this anymore?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Hindsight's always 2020. But when I was in the industry, I'd grown up in it. I'd grown up as a child actor and model. My own mom was a model. So I really didn't have a choice in it. It was something that I was just brought up into. And so a lot of the things that I was exposed to or saw seemed normal at the time. And it wasn't until I started maturing, it wasn't until I started being around and having my own healthier relationships that I was exposed to this other side of the world that was, reflecting back, this is not normal, this is not healthy. And it kind of shapes my values now about really how I feel about children being involved in entertainment as a whole. But I was able to see a lot of things that at the time I didn't know was not normal. And those are, I would never reveal these people's names and identities out of respect for their privacy. And that's not my story to tell, but there are well-known big names that everybody knows. Some of them that came out of my hometown of Dallas, Texas, that were exploited, that were trafficked, that were used sexually by people in positions of power that manipulated them. And fortunately, I was not one of those. I stayed far away from that, but it was something that I was exposed to or were aware of. And while I did have my own situations where I did feel that I was being exploited, I was not raped or trafficked. So that's important for me to know, because some people think that that I was a victim of that, and I was not. So seeing that, and also seeing how the trajectory of people's careers that made certain choices like that. And some, I'd say, didn't make those conscious choices because they were manipulated and coerced from childlike mind state. But anyway, that those decisions and choices that were made in their career, either for them or by them, aligned with very successful things happening. And so I really didn't understand when I would hold my ground and when I would choose to have integrity and say, no, I'm not going to wear that, wear the pants, like, why do I have to take my pants off for this video? This doesn't make sense. So things like that would happen. And then the next day I would get a call from my manager saying, I'm sorry, they don't want to work with you anymore. And I'd say, why? I'd say, well, they think you're difficult to work with. So then you would get a reputation then for being somebody that was not going to do as they said. Sorry. And from the outset, people don't understand what that means, but when you're difficult to work with, it means you're not willing to do whatever they want you to do. And they'll say, you don't want it bad enough, or you're not hardworking enough, or, you're just not willing to do what it takes to be successful. And really what that means is you're not willing to compromise your integrity. And I want to get this message out so desperately to young women, because they get into this industry or they move to Hollywood with these big dreams and they don't understand how it works. And I'm not saying that every single person who's successful in Hollywood has been victimized or exploited themselves, but I'm saying I haven't met very many. And I want them to know that and be armed with that knowledge, because what happened to me was I thought that something was wrong with me. And I thought I wasn't talented enough, or I wasn't a good enough singer, a multi-instrumentalist, or a good enough producer. And I started reflecting that societal viewpoint of not being enough. And really that was not what it was about. And so that is my story, and kind of how I started figuring things out is watching people have sex with the director or somebody's boyfriend, or a lot of sexual quid pro quo going on, and a willingness to do whatever it took behind those closed doors. And I saw parents allow it. And that's a whole, other world, but that's basically what opened my eyes, is seeing that everything I thought was not real.
Yeah. Wow. So there's a few things that you were talking about. I was taking some notes, a few things that you said. So you were saying things that you thought were normal. So I guess, I don't know if this is a question or a statement that I have, but is there a way to get people to, especially because when you're younger, you don't really know better. Is there a way to get, especially young women, to understand what is normal and what is not normal? Because if you're seeing it everywhere, then of course you're not going to think anything's wrong.
Well, I think that having a sense of identity is really the priority for all young women before you get an Instagram, before you get on the internet, before you come out into the world saying, this is who I am or how I identify, right?
Right.
This is really important, because that is our foundation. And if we don't have a foundation, the second somebody, comes into your awareness and space, you're highly manipulatable. Because somebody who doesn't stand for anything will fall for anything, right? So that's kind of what happens. And you look at how it relates to human trafficking, or sexual exploitation, which is just exploiting a vulnerability. So a lot of that times, a vulnerability is just a lack of confidence, a lack of self possession, a lack of identity. And traffickers, exploiters, predators, record label executives, whoever it is, it's going to look at a person to exploit them, is going to look at somebody who has those vulnerabilities. And contrary to that, they're going to look at somebody who is self-possessed, who does know who they are, that knows they're, loved by God and has a strong family. They're going to say, "Ooh, that's too much work." So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. Do you think that so like some of the stuff you said, like having sex for roles with directors and things like that. Also too, if someone's listening with your kids, this probably is not the best episode. I meant to say that earlier. I'll put that somewhere so people know. But back to the question. So if we see that on Law and Order, we see that in movies, we see that on TV, but I guess in my little bubble, I in my head, I'm like, oh, well, people probably don't really do that, or if people do, it's like 3%. So do you think Hollywood is redeemable? Do you think that we should create our own Hollywood? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that we have a very polarized selection right now, and we have things like Pure Flix, which I think is serving its own audience, not to knock on that, but it's not really inclusive of everybody that just wants to enjoy a diverse selection of media, but that just doesn't have like all of these I don't even know what to call it. Yeah, well, exactly. So
that's what it is.
Basically, so it's not good entertainment. It doesn't have that artistic edge and quality that we not only are accustomed to, but is really that we can appreciate, right?
Yeah.
So you know, we don't have a Transformers movie on the right,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So things like that, you know, we have to build, and it's hard because you have to be patient, you have to put in the work, we have to start supporting people trying to do that in order for it to be a reality.
Yeah, so growing up, my parents loved that stuff. If I said Fireproof, my mom, Fireproof and Facing the Giants, my mom thinks that's the epitome of cinema. She thinks those are the greatest movies that's ever been created. And you know, they have a target market, and they're not bad movies. They're decent, and they're probably the best of that category. But I've always thought, like, as Christians, we can do so much better. There's so many talented Christians, and I don't really understand why we have all of these like really cheesy, terribly written, kind of poor acted out movies. And I always said when I was younger, I was like, if I ever get money, I'm going to invest in someone to make decent Christian movies, because Transformers, that, like you said, for Transformers, it's not even that big of a story. Like, it doesn't have to have the inappropriate scenes that it has. It just needs someone to write it, to come together and put it together, and then instead of those inappropriate scenes, add something more action or add something funny. And that's all we need. We don't necessarily need people who are like throwing a Bible verse in every 5 seconds, but we just don't need the raunchiness.
That's right.
Extra. And
absolutely.
I really, if anyone listening, if you are interested in that, if you want to be like, please like reach out to me. I don't have any money right now, but like, I want to support you, because that's a very good point. Like, that's one of my biggest problems with this stuff. If we're going to change the culture, if we're going to make things better, we can't like produce terrible movies. And not all those movies are terrible. Some of them are really, really good. It's just a majority of them are just really cheesy and
right. Well, we have to appeal to a wider audience, because there's some people who are not Christian. They're good people. They just don't want the perverted nonsense from Hollywood and the constant political indoctrination and you know, all of that stuff. They just want it removed. So that's basically what we need to create to have a wider net, to connect with people and to have a shared culture.
Yeah. I was going to ask this question last, but I think I'll just keep this up here. So do you have any advice for people, for young girls that are listening, maybe not even young, but like 20, 21, that are interested in going to Hollywood, and like they are very talented actresses and they want to be a part of this, but they just don't want to get caught up and they're concerned, or they're already there and they feel like they're getting caught up? Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a two-part thing. You know, if it's a younger, child that happens, where the parent is going to be involved in that conversation, to protect them. If it's a younger child that loves, acting or being in front of a camera or any of those things, I would say I think that's great. Being artistic or being creative and wanting to express yourself, channeling it into, really refining that art form. So what if it's dance, or if it's music, singing, instrumentation, acting class or theater? Those things are really a way of nurturing that gift in a child and that passion. But I think where we go wrong is nurturing this idea. Like, for instance, if we surround our kids with YouTube videos or Disney, right? The kid gets an idea that the validation is more important than the art form. They're not doing it for the purpose of, I love dancing. They're doing it for the purpose of, I like the feeling I get when people pay attention to me dancing. And I want more people to pay attention to me. So it's a lot of kids that are really, what they're craving is that validation from their parents, or that attention from other people, that external validation. And that can be a really tricky thing, because you're setting up your kid to constantly need that external validation to feel good about themselves. And they might not actually even like dancing, and missing out on other gifts they might have. But if the case is they really like dancing, is finding a studio that isn't going to be raunchy and having them sexualized, but get to enjoy dancing and honing their craft. And if they want to make a video to share with friends and family, or invite them to their recital, that's okay. And I think that's a healthy amount of, validation to applaud their efforts and their growth. But it's a tricky thing, because I think I've seen way too many parents, and as a result of what my husband does, directing, being a former Hollywood director, is so many parents get in it for the wrong reasons. They get their kids in it for the wrong reasons. And so when somebody, and there's tells here, when a kid says, I want to go to Hollywood, or I want to be a YouTube star, or I want to be a famous singer, you know, those little keywords are good indicators to me as a parent and somebody who's worked with these Disney stars, writing for them, you know, producing, vocal coaching, all of that stuff I've been involved with. I can tell right away that that's not a good sign, that the kid is not doing it for just the love of that, but needing that external validation, or maybe their parents are influencing that a bit and trying to live vicariously through their children. So yeah, that the goal really tells you that, like, what do they want? What feeling are they trying to get? Is it joy of the dancing, singing, performing, or is it the validation?
Okay. Wow, that's good. And I really like what you said, the difference between like the validation or like the joy of the actual art form. That was great advice. Great advice. Okay. So we can transition a little bit into, I guess it's kind of the same realm, but what made you get passionate? And you kind of touched on it, about sex work and human trafficking. Like, what was it that just was like, okay, I need to do something?
Well, I think having my own children really changed my heart towards really understanding how beautiful innocence is, and and how much effort it takes to protect that. So as a parent, I mean, that really changed me and opened my eyes to so much. But also integrating my experiences in Hollywood and working in the industry as long as I have, understanding that those two things really are very interconnected. Because ultimately it's up to us to protect children. And so when I realized, though, the extent of it, I mean, I thought that it was just kids in Hollywood being exploited. I didn't realize that there was this overall large demand of child exploitation, of CSAM videos. And for those who might not be aware of what that means, it's child sexual exploitation material. You know, people will say child porn, and that's really a gross term, because then we're referring to kids as like a you know, a what's it called, like a category, right?
Okay.
And it sexualizes them, and so that wording is really important. So if you know, learn something today, child sexual abuse material, so it's really crime scene videos that we're talking about. Yeah, so sorry, I said exploitation before, but it's CSAM is child sexual abuse material.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So after getting, you said with your children, that kind of made you understand a little bit more. And I feel like we hear that a lot. Like once people start having kids, they get to see their minds are open. And can you talk a little bit about family and how important family is in this fight?
Right. I mean, family is the first and most important defense against exploitation, because we talked a little bit earlier about vulnerabilities and trauma. So the trauma usually begins in the home. And if you look at the majority of people who have been in prostitution, in sex work, and who have left and exited trafficking, they have all had some tale of being exploited as a child. And so this is a consistent theme going on. And that tells us that it really does start and begin in the home. So the most vulnerable children are the ones who are coming from broken homes, are in foster care, who are, you know, financially disadvantaged, living in areas where they, you know, poor schooling, things like that. Those are the kids that are most likely to be trafficked, to be exploited. And who are in the industry, I should point out. And that's where I thought it was, but I didn't realize the widespread nature of it. It's really any vulnerability.
Okay. And then, so next question. With sex work, that's kind of switching gears to a little bit more older crowd. So we hear a lot about sex work in the news, and Kamala Harris mentioned that she was going to make it prostitution legal across the 50 United States. And, you know, we can get into that later. But can we talk a little bit about sex work and why we should not be supporting it? And then also, could you talk about sex work and what we as Christians can possibly do to help people who are in it and things like that?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, prostitution as a term, I feel like, as believers, as people who want to be loving and accepting and help heal, we have to look at prostitution, prostitutes, sex workers, trafficking victims as the victims that they are, regardless of how they identify. And one of the things that people don't understand is, as a coping mechanism, to reclaim what was taken from them, people refer to themselves as sex workers as a term of empowerment. And it's a way, and I understand it and I can empathize, of reclaiming your own sexuality that was taken from you. So all that they've understood is exploitation. And many of them, this started very, very young. So if we can have empathy and understand that this trauma started way before their brain was even developed. They didn't have that family unit that was supporting them and loving them. So their sense of self-worth is so distorted. And then you add that trauma, you add that normalcy and what those brain patterns that are making that their identity. And so when somebody says I'm a sex worker, that is a term that they self-identify as. It doesn't change the nature of what's happening to them, which is exploitation. So whether you identify as being okay with exploiting yourself or not, it doesn't change the nature of what's happening to you. And over 70% of people, sex workers, have been raped or abused by the buyer. And the buyer isn't buying women to empower them. Right. None of them are. They're not, and they're not buying them to have beautiful, loving, consensual sex. They're not buying. That's not what the demand is. So there's this objective reality, regardless of what people on the left in these pro-sex work movements think, or Kamala Harris, or any of these people think, including the sex workers. It doesn't change the nature of what the buyer is consuming. There's objective reality here. And this is an exploitation industry. They're buying women to act out these horrific fantasies, and that is it's the nature of what it is exploitive and disgusting. And women are not for sale. Children are not for sale, and we're not receptacles for men. And that is basically, we have to speak truth about that, about that objective reality, and not be afraid to offend anyone, including somebody who's a victim. Now, how do we broach that conversation, right? How do we talk to somebody who might identify like that? And it's going to be the same way with love, with empathy, with understanding, and a lifeline, and letting them know that we care about them, and that they deserve wonderful things, love, jobs, whatever they want, whatever you feel on your heart is needed at that moment. And there's lots of wonderful things you can do. You can make care packages, you can support organizations that go and do that outreach, that have been trained. So, I wouldn't recommend, without really having an understanding of how to do this work effectively. We could be hindering it if we really don't know, and we don't have that training of how to talk to people that are trapped in this. So we want to give them those lifelines and support, and we can learn how to do it. We can get trained in it, or we can support people who do this work actively and successfully to help them safely exit and slowly realize their self-worth, slowly build that trust relationship, because it takes time. We think about how long they've been exploited, going back to childhood. It's not going to happen the first time you meet somebody and say, Jesus loves you, I love you, here's a care package, let's go. It doesn't work like that, right?
Yeah, statistically, I read somewhere it takes like 7 encounters. Like, you have to go, the people who do that, who that is their ministry, they have to go see someone, have 7 meaningful interactions before they'll even consider it. Right. And I like what you said earlier at the beginning of the question, when you were talking about it's an exploitation, and you were saying that most people don't really even want, it doesn't start off as something like, not everybody starts off as a sex worker, sometimes other things, because when I have had conversations with people talking about how I don't support porn and how I don't support sex work, a lot, especially people on the left, they always go, and even some libertarians, no offense to libertarians listening, but a lot of them go, well, they want to be here. That's what they make that decision. We can't legislate morality. But it's so much more than that. As a woman, I cannot imagine someone waking up one day and absolutely saying, and when they're living their best life, when all their needs are met, saying, yes, I would like to become a sex worker. That is just not something that I think it's impossible. Like I would never believe someone that said that.
Yeah, and that's so true. And you know, again, that's somebody who has been victimized would say something like that, because you look going back to slavery. You know, there were actual slaves that were so manipulated, so brainwashed that they wanted to stay in slavery. And this is, you know, I've studied brain science a lot because I wanted to understand trauma. I wanted to understand it, you know, for my own healing and for helping others. But, you know, your brain likes what's familiar, and it creates its own survival mechanism to keep you in this homeostasis where you feel safe. And sadly, you know, some victims feel safer in the exploitation they know, rather than the world they don't know, with people they don't trust. And so many of them have been moved, you know, city to city, different handlers, different traffickers. So some situations are better than others. And if they have learned to survive in that place that they're at, they will want to stay there. And it's not always a conscious choice. It's a brain survival state choice, that where your brain goes into survival mode and you're not thinking from a place of, you know, any place else conscious, really. It's really just, you're just trying to survive.
Yeah. And I think, like you said earlier too, and it's connected to what you just said about thinking of people as victims, as someone who is a victim of this situation. And as Christians, I think sometimes we, especially if we've been like a Christian for a long time and we're just so in our little Christian bubble, and we see, you know, J-Lo on TV doing all this stuff half naked, we get in our little minds like, well, they shouldn't be doing that. Those little girls are fast. They're wearing the short booty shorts and blah, blah, blah. But I think that once, like you said, once we start thinking of people as victims and we really truly see that it's the brain trauma, it is all these other things, we can truly have compassion and we can support other organizations. I do like what you said. I don't think that, especially with all of the stuff that came out recently with Epstein Island and Q, I know Q is very popular and all of these things. I don't think that the majority of us, dare I say 70% of us, are equipped to help one-on-one a victim. I think, like you said, organizations that have been trained, that have been doing this for years, are better equipped. So I know there's a lot of people who listen that are like, I have to do something. Well, I think the best way would be to support people or get the training yourself. I don't think, you know, going up to someone you think is a victim is the best method either. So on that note, you said care packages and you said support organizations. Are there any particular ones that you absolutely love that you want to
Yeah,
share?
and I wanted to touch on something too. Is some people think, you know, I want to do something with trafficking, but they don't, you know, going back to the vulnerability thing. The people at the most risk, we have the ability to interfere before a trafficker comes for them. And so those people get overlooked. The kids in foster care, the kids that are left after school, that the parents are working 2 jobs, you know, those kids are the kids that we need to be a friend to, that let them know that we're there for them if they need anything. We don't need to come into this with this hero egoic mindset of I'm going to rescue people. It's I'm going to be a loving person of light walking around to let them know I'm here. I'll be a light worker for you. I will help bring you to church. I'll help bring you food, whatever it is that you need. I'm here for you. And just letting them know consistently that we're that loving presence in their life unconditionally is really the lifeline. And it may take a long time for somebody to feel comfortable opening up to you. It might be somebody you've known a long time that says, hey, you know, I've been abused by my stepfather for years and years and years. And so that's why it's really important to focus inward on who we are and how we show up for people, rather than focusing on the acts and how we can show up as a hero. Right. So, you know, foster kids, again, you know, the most of these kids that are being rescued in these raids all across the country that we're hearing about, you know, where federal marshals go in, these kids have all been in foster care at one point or another. And so those are the kids that we can rally around. And, you know, it varies from state to state what they'll allow us to do. But if you can be an advocate and you have time to be a mentor or to help offer a ride or karate lessons or whatever it is, that is anti-trafficking work. So I really want to emphasize that, you know, any kid that's in a position of vulnerability or whose parents might be struggling, intercede, be that person, because you are rescuing somebody from potentially being trafficked. And that's how we make a dent. And also, participating in the culture that creates the demand, removing ourselves. So before we even get to that point where we're sitting watching Beyonce, twerk or whatever, J-Lo on live stream or whatever culture we're consuming, we shouldn't even be commenting, because we shouldn't even be watching and supporting it. So rewind, comes from within, comes with how we're participating in that culture. Because if nobody's watching, there's no funding for it anymore. And so we then take that money, our attention, our energy, and we reinvest it into things that we want to see, the world that we want reflected back to us. And that takes a lot of work, and that's harder to do than just criticizing everything else and trying to rescue people, right? And that was my own journey, is thinking I could fix it, and you can't. You can just do those things working from the inside out.
Yeah, no, I love that, especially because like I said earlier, when this first happened, I know there was a lot of people who were like, yeah, I'm going to get mine, I'm going to rush in. And it's like, there's so many other things that we can do. And I really like that you touched on the foster care system. And I want to do some episodes talking about that eventually as well, because that is something that we need to work on. And God calls us to be there for the orphan. I mean, I don't know 100%, like foster kids, some of them are orphans, some of them, their parents are just not in their lives right now. But either way, the Bible does call us to be there for them. And I'm really glad that you touched on that. Another thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is you said consuming content. So another huge thing is porn. Porn is really big. It has it's just gotten bigger over the years. And growing up, so we didn't have access to internet because my parents were very much like, no, like they were very, very strict. And like at the time, I absolutely hated it. I was mad at them. Now I'm like, okay, all right, y'all did good on that one. I'll give you this one. But I know that I had other friends who grew up and they didn't even mean to fall into stuff. It just sometimes things will pop up. So now there's people who I'm 26. So now there's people who are my age and even a little bit younger who were exposed to things at a young age, not even intentionally. And now they have these addictions. It is very common, even amongst Christians, which is, I think we just don't talk about it. And another thing I really want to talk about on the podcast one day is do a full episode about this, but is porn. A porn addiction is it's common, and it's even common amongst Christians. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about what we can do to maybe, well, you mentioned just stop consuming. So are there other things we can do? And then also to, we're recording this in December when MasterCard and Visa no longer are taking Pornhub subscriptions, or worded some way like that, and which is great. So are we going to see more things like this? Do you think other companies are going to take a stand? And what are your just tons of thoughts? You can say whatever.
Absolutely. Okay. So, Fight the New Drug is a great resource, and maybe you can have somebody come. Yeah, that's a great resource because they go into the brain science, and it's not just moralizing. And I'm feeling that we're all being called to come at this from a place of where the language other people speaking, who might not be believers. So it's not going to help to throw Bible verses at people. They have to understand that there actually is brain science behind this, and porn is a drug, and it's not a drug in the sense that you're putting it in your mouth, but it's something that you're consuming that has the same effects as something like cocaine on the brain, the same addictive propensity. So knowing that, we have to, be aware of how dangerous it is and how highly addicting it is, and how widely available it is. It's built into the algorithms. Porn, you'll ask any parenting expert or anybody who is an expert in online safety, porn is just 2 clicks away from children. And in a world where Chrome and Google is in the classroom, in the home, all of the smart technology, it is going to find your child. It is a struggle being a parent. It's the first generation where we've had to protect your home from the inside out, not just locking the doors, but from the inside out. So I think it's really great that your parents were like, look, we're just no internet. We're not doing that. And it's hard. It's hard to be the parent doing that because it's counterculture and your kids, you know, not going to be happy about it.
Was not happy. I was annoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and I would encourage, we talk to our kids, we explain why. They understand, they even, you know, at an age appropriate level for each of them, what trafficking is, what exploitation is, what happens to the brain, why some people choose this, and how they might not see those traps, so that they really understand, rather than just being like, no, you know, this is why. And now as they get older, they start to see that. They start to see, by just meeting people, those differences. So, you know, with porn culture isn't just pornography, right? It's any culture that is promoting the sexualization of not only children, but women. And that isn't just about like revealing outfits, but it's about anything that is promoting sexuality, hypersexuality. And so that's basically falls under that definition. And so when we have a whole Instagram influencer culture, Kardashian culture, we call it, you know, it's this narcissistic culture that is hypersexualized, and it's sending that message that this is our identity. This is how you are. This is a currency. This is where you derive value, attention, affirmation, all of that stuff. So if we get rid of all that junk, it makes it a heck of a lot easier for children to learn who they are truly, when that's not distracting them. It's like the same thing as offering our kids drugs every day. We would never do that. But the social media, the effects of social media on the brain, causing, you know, astronomical levels of anxiety, depression, addiction, and the pornography, it all goes together. So the only solution really is to remove it all. And I've tried as a parent to be like, well, maybe this is okay. Let's leave this, maybe. And all it does is stress you out as a parent, because it's just so much garbage to have to micromanage. So really, we just kind of wiped the slate for us. That was the right decision, and just slowly allow what media is appropriate into their lives. And that enriches them. It's not just about like avoiding what's bad. It's about like, what could you be doing with your time, right? In that time, like what was good that we were missing? What was helping us grow, or was really funny that we missed out on, right? In lieu of all this garbage that isn't doing anything but making us feel, you know, further away from who we are. And so porn, and I forgot to mention the two organizations I work with are Exodus at joinexodus.com or .org, and Exodus Cry. Those are two organizations that you can go to that are great. Exodus Cry is doing amazing outreach. They have a great film. So they are the ones who started Trafficking Hub, the Trafficking Hub campaign to draw awareness to the exploitation, the trafficking, and abuse of children on their platforms. Pornhub, also known as Trafficking Hub, does not require age or consent verification. And while we're really excited that all of these efforts from grassroots activists all the way up through Exodus Cry and Layla Mikawa at the top of that, leading that campaign, you know, there's so much work to be done. We're happy that Visa, MasterCard, they pulled out, and that was a great step in the right direction. But people don't realize you can still be, you know, a verified user with just an email. So it is making it harder. But the nature of the whole platform needs to be removed, similar to the way Backpage was removed when the Trump DOJ removed that. There was so much child trafficking happening on that platform that stopped, and they were able to make those rescues, identify those children, and take it down. And that's really what we have to decide in society, is if we're going to have websites selling children, selling women or not. Is that going to be a value? And, you know, I relate to what you said, like with the libertarians, or I love, you know, anybody on the left, they say, you know, well, it's a slippery slope. We can't legislate morality. Our whole Constitution legislates morality. We can't go kill people. We can't go rape people. So we have to decide as a society what good comes from allowing women and children and men and young boys too now to be sold online for the financial gain of, you know, pedophiles. And why we'd be sitting here arguing for that. You know, it just, that's really alarming to me, is how many people are an advocate for pedophiles without even really realizing what they're doing.
Yeah, and everything you said, like great, great points. I talked to some of my friends who aren't, I have a really good friend who isn't a Christian, and we talk about Pornhub and watching porn and things like that. And I've sent him a lot of Fight the New Drug resources. And he has stopped. I want to say he's like at day 80 or something like that. So very proud of him for that. If you're listening, love you, proud of you. But one of the things that he did say that has really gotten to him is, like you said, the age. They don't verify the age. And it's a lot of it, you could be watching underage kids, and that's pedophilia. And he said, like, when he learned a little bit more about that, that really was like, okay, I need to stop. And I think that like you said about legislating morality, I think that there are some things that are just wrong. And I know we live in a very relative society now. And this podcast is targeted toward Christians, but there are people who aren't Christians that do listen to it. And even though we live in a relative society, there are objective truths. Like you said, murder is objectively wrong. There's no way to get around that. Rape is objectively wrong. And marketing off of exploitation, profiting off of exploitation, participating in further exploitation, because that's what you're doing when you're watching it. You're participating in the exploitation. That is objectively wrong, and there's no way getting around it. And I do think you're very right. We do have to start standing up and saying, like, this is wrong. And those organizations are great. I've heard of a few of them, and I will leave in the description the links and like how to get involved with them and things like that.
Absolutely. And I wanted to point out, somebody brought this to my attention yesterday. They were like, well, Landon, you're not for, cancel culture and all of that. You're doing the same thing. And it's not the same thing. No, promoting, child exploitation, rape and torture videos, and women with plastic bags on their heads, suffocating them. This is not cancel culture. This is illegal. This is illegal and exploitive. Yeah. So it's the same thing as, would you go and shop at a store that was selling children? No, you wouldn't. Would you have a credit card of a company that sells children and uses their credit cards? No, we wouldn't. So we have to start thinking about that in terms of this. It's not that we don't like their ideological viewpoint. It's that they're committing a crime, an atrocious crime.
Yeah. And to piggyback off of what you said, I lost my train of thought.
Cancel culture.
I forgot. I guess it was
no worries.
Important. Yeah.
Happens all the time.
I should have written it down. I've been writing stuff down this whole time and I didn't for that 1 second. But anyway, I guess it wasn't important. But yeah. And then last question before we wrap up, if there are 3 advice, and you can just recap everything you've said if you want to, but like 3 points you want to give to parents listening to protect their kids from sex trafficking, to protect their kids from in Hollywood, or just to help their kids just not become victims. If there's 3 things that you would tell them.
Yeah. Number 1, Hollywood is run by pedophiles, and it's a pedophilic culture where people look the other way when abuse is happening. And it's an exploitive industry. It is not a healthy place to raise a healthy child with boundaries and a strong sense of identity beyond that external fake validation that is very confusing for a child. So if you want to protect your child, keep them out of Hollywood. And also, cleaning our home from the inside out. It's a tedious process. It's unavoidable. And even with certain apps that claim to be parental protection, and like you could go on Safari or Google Chrome and put in the parental protection, they don't work, and they're designed to not work. So we cannot rely on the same companies that have the 2-click algorithms away from high-paying porn incentivized ads. And things like that to drive traffic to these places. We can't trust the same people that are part of the sexual exploitation and porn culture to be the protectors of our children and the guides in that process. We have to lean on ourselves. We have to do our own research. And for me, it got too tedious listening to all the experts and trying to find the different apps that do work and all that. It got to be too much. And I realized, what am I doing here? Why is it so important for my kid to be on the internet and perusing this world that they don't understand when they don't even know who they are? So I said, no Instagram, no YouTube, none of that stuff. And anything that is allowed is stuff that is clean, that doesn't have a hypersexualized agenda or any leftism agenda in it, political indoctrination, none of that. It's just clean, appropriate child content. And we have those conversations. I'm not, we don't keep it G-rated all the time. We have real conversations that are nuanced, and we educate our children on the dangers and have those conversations rather than just a, no, because I said no, household, because that only, when kids are then exposed via friends or school or the world, they will not be equipped and to understand and have that education of why it's wrong, what it leads to, how dangerous it is. So that's really been the best path for us forward, is cleaning from the inside out and really just allowing them instead to invest in their talents. And my son actually loves making videos. So, we allow him to do that because he loves, doing these little videos with his cat. And anyway, so we allow him to do that and make funny videos and learn how to edit things and how to make cool effects, but we're not broadcasting it, to the world. We're not trying to get him likes, all of that stuff. Yeah. So that's really where, we have to kind of see, why are we doing this and what message are we sending, at this young age?
Yeah. And I just want to add this, and I always preference this. I'm not a parent, and I don't want to tell anybody how to parent because I don't know. Landon is a parent, so she can tell y'all. But one thing I think is really important is watching, doing the whole, here's my phone type thing. And I'm just gonna share a quick story. I had a friend that was dating this girl that had a kid, and we were all hanging out one day. This was in undergrad, and the kid had come over, cute little girl, super sweet. And the mom just gave her iPad and said, here, just watch this and sit to the side. And just being I love kids, and I have a motherly whatever to myself, and I'm just kind of oh, I don't think you should have done that, but I'm not gonna tell you how to raise your kids. And I just casually walked over, oh, what are you looking at? And it was the weirdest thing. She was giggling. It was a lady dressed up as Elsa and a guy dressed up as Batman. And I'm assuming it was for kids. I was but it looked weird to me as that could be what kids are into now. But my whole point in saying that is just piggybacking off of what Landon said, just working on what's inside. It really probably is not best to just give your kids whatever, because it looked weird to me. I thought it was strange. I don't know. And it's for kids, but you don't know if you're not watching yourself, you don't know what they're doing. It could have been something super innocent, and then all of a sudden they do one thing that's a little off.
Absolutely.
You don't know these people's intention. So just like she said, inside, pay attention to what's going on inside your family. And then if you don't have kids, I think it's also good information to take in from what she said for your future kids, but also too for your nieces and nephews, for your friends that have kids. So if I'm watching one of my friends' kids, I don't do the whole here's the iPad thing. I try to talk, we try to do things one-on-one. I mean, a lot of them are more babies, but I still wouldn't just give them just an item. And I think these are just things to know going forward, even if you don't have kids. So last
100%.
Oh, yeah. Last question. If someone wants to find you, support you, listen to your podcast, listen to your music, if they want to donate to any of your causes, how do they do that?
Well, you can go to my website at matriarchsongs.com, and hopefully you can put that in the description. Yep. I know matriarch's kind of one of those weird spelling words, but that's has great information. Yeah, it leads to the organizations I work with. And so there's great resources, information there. Also, all of my music proceeds go to trafficking victims or these organizations actively helping that. So I don't make money off of that. It all goes to them. And then my husband and I, Robbie Starbuck, we do a podcast called Grow Up. You can go to growuplive.com. We're on YouTube. We're on Rumble now, since we're switching over there with all the YouTube censorship going on. So you can find us there on Instagram. I'm Matriarch Songs. And you can find me on Twitter as well at iMatriarch on Twitter.
All right. Thank you so much, Landon. I really appreciate you coming on. I honestly learned a lot. That's part of what I was taking notes for. And I think that everyone listening had to learn something too. And you guys really follow her, stay connected. Let's support her. Let's support, I think I said it at the beginning too, but let's support people who have our values, because that's more of what we need out there. We need more of people who are supporting and doing better things than those people who are honestly hurting culture. As we say on the podcast, we are changing culture and bringing back traditional values. The only way to change culture is to be in the culture and doing things that are counterculture. Once we get more people supporting this, once, Landon is like at the top of the charts, more people are going to look at her like, oh, wait, what is this? And we can help each other, and we help build, and we can get back to a more morally based society. Anyway, that was my rant for the day. Thank you guys all for listening. Please don't forget about this month's donation. There will be links in the description as well for that. So yeah, everyone, thanks so much for listening. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.